So here we are in Stitch and Sew, and we're creating a typical lettering job, and what we've done is picked a Times type font, which is Cheltenham Large, in lettering mode, and set it to 1/2 inch high, and basically just hit stitch it here to make that into stitching, which gives us a stitch count of 2026. It also, at the bottom of the screen in the object list, gives us the order of the letters in which they're going to sew. So going back to our lecture notes and our goals here, what we're trying to do is play with these stitch and sew modes and understand how they work. So we were just in lettering mode to create that. Now there's a bunch of things that I want to do. I want to make a second, going to our assignment here, we want to make some 1/2 inch high letters, and then underneath that we're going to put some kind of slogan, which is typical in a lot of logos, maybe some explanatory thing down here. So it says, so we're going to do something less than 1/2 inch tall underneath in the smaller lettering. And also we're going to do some edits to this. Like I can see the C in TextMac didn't work. So also I want to say in here is moving individual elements or parts like letters. So we're going to move them. So let me go ahead and go back, and remember that's general operating mode, which means I want to get rid of lettering mode. So I can hit the lettering mode to unpush it, or another thing I can do is hit escape, and the escape key actually got me out of that. And I just want to scoot the C a little bit to the right. So I want to click on the C, and I can either pick up the center dot, round dot, and move it, or for those of you who like to be really precise, if you happen to have a laptop with a 10-key keypad or a desktop, use the arrow keys on the 10-key keypad, which is the 4 and the 6 key. The 6 key will move you to the right. Unfortunately, the top numbers on a laptop won't work, but if you've got your 10 keys, then you can go ahead and nudge it. So I'm going to experiment here. I know I don't have so I don't have it because I have a small laptop, but I can click and just kind of drag that to the right. And notice that when I do, I'm moving the outline of the object, and once I'm done, to confirm that, just go ahead and click off to empty space, and you can see that moves. So that worked out pretty well. Now the next thing I want to look at is we will look at the bottom here and notice that this is also telling me some more information, which is not only the order, TEXMAC, left to right, but it's also telling you what's happening between the letters. Between this T and this E, there's no cut, because if there was a cut, there would be some scissors here. Now, I can create that artificially by just moving and pretending that I've got spaced out letters. You'll notice that there should be a cut here if I move it far off enough. In this case, well, it's going to depend on the settings. So let's look at what the Stitch and Sew is trying to do, and that's under what's called connection policy. If we go to design and connection policy, we're saying that you're going to cut if the stitch is longer than 2/10 of a millimeter, or in other words 2 centimeters apart, almost an inch. Well, that's kind of crazy. That means that it's not going to trim unless I move at least an inch away. You can see from that, and if I click, now you can see that it added some scissors there. Now we don't want to do that. We don't want to have to. We'd like it to trim a little sooner than that, so you can always play with that. You can go to Tools, and then, to Design, set your connection policy to something more meaningful, like anything bigger than 2 millimeters, which would be 20 in this dialog box, or 20/10 of a millimeter. And now if I start moving stuff away that's not too far, if I generated the text fresh, then you'd see that trim. So, but let's say you don't want to mess with the connection policy, you want to just go ahead and add a trim in. Like for example, you can see that there is no trim between the TextMac and the INC, whereas it may be okay to leave that little stitch in there. But at the eye, I would absolutely trim there. So you can right-click, go to Edit Connection. You'll see a similar window pop up, but this is called the local connection policy. In other words, what's happening between these two letters, the C and the I. You notice that I've got the I highlighted because it's got the connection box to the left. And I'm going to hit Trim Always. So no matter what setting I have this on, when it comes to these two letters, it will always trim right there between these letters. And you can see the symbols there. All right. Another thing I said is that you can also change colors in here. And so let's say we want TextMac in blue, but maybe INC in a navy blue. So all you have to do is kind of draw a box, and remember, I'm not in any of these three modes. We can move, we can resize, rotate. So let's go ahead and change color. So we just demonstrated moving. We also demonstrated we can control the connection and even the order in which this sews. I'm going to draw a box around the INC, and all you have to do to change that color is go up to this color swatch up here and just pick a different color. Now you can pick from thread libraries, or generally it's okay to just go and pick something from your color mixer and hit OK. And watch what happens when I hit OK. When I do, you're going to see a different symbol here between TextMac and INC, so watch for that. I'm going to go ahead and click right now. See that now I've got these in different colors, but you'll also see that there's a stop sign there. Now, when you load this design onto your embroidery machines in the DST format or commercial formats like DST or EXP, will break down a design not by letters but or sections, but it'll break it down into color sections. So this became a two-section design to any embroidery machine. The machine will see this is a separate block that will sew together, and then it'll see this as another block that will sew all together. So, so it's important to recognize that the machine sees two sections, and it knows that the difference between each section is they need to be assigned a different color. So that's how that works there. And now let's go ahead and continue on with the next part of our presentation, which is let's go ahead and put the second line of text below that, and we want to fit a longer phrase under that. Like, let's type the word embroidery machines. And we know this is going to be 1/2 inch high, and if you've been sewing for a while, you may be guessing that the word embroidery machines is going to be pretty darn small. So the way we treat a second line of text is go ahead and do it as a separate run. So we have to go back into lettering, and then we'll go ahead and type the word embroidery machines. I'll make it lowercase. And at this point, the numerical height doesn't matter. All that matters in these typical jobs is that we want to fit this word underneath the width of TextMac Incorporated, which is a typical thing. You'll see a lot of logos like that, where you have maybe a picture logo and underneath some kind of display descriptive text underneath. So what you can do, you can still move stuff in lettering mode. Just move your cursor till it is right somewhere over the middle of this and kind of drag that. I'm going to line it up to one side of the text, and then if you grab a corner node where it's a square and you drag, and when you resize, then it's going to keep this. It should keep it in proportion. Bear with me here. I'm looking for my proportional grab here. See if I can't get this a little closer so we can see this. I'm going to roll up my embroidery settings dialog box. Okay, so we'll resize that. So that's kind of a nice looking layout there, and I didn't want to loop that. Bear with me. Let's reset that here. Okay, so I know we want to make this use this frame, by the way, as this box frame, and now we can proportionally resize that. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so that's sized up or sized to customer spec. We fit it within underneath. Now, this is where a lot of people get in trouble, is that I've worked years at the help desk, and I get a lot of complaints from people that are starting out that their lettering doesn't look good when they sew it out. So I give you a good little piece of criteria, is that if you view your grid, view, show and hide grid, oh, I lost my lettering. That's another thing, is you have to make it into stitching before you go do something else. So let me go ahead and move this here like this, and let's kind of shrink that down. Bear with me. So again, if you drag the corner node, it keeps the lettering proportion. Don't do this. See how you're starting to distort the letters. You want to keep the look approximately the uniform and the same. Align your second line here. Once that's done, go ahead and make into stitching. I'm going to make this a different color. Let's say 2 shades of blue. I'm going to put like a white. Let's try that. And I'll go ahead and hit stitch it. Okay, now I'm going to go to get out of lettering mode. Let's make this more in 3D so we can see it. I'll go to View and Realistic View. Now we can see the letters in realistic sort of 3D simulation. You can even go to 1-to-1 and see what it's going to look like, and if you really have a properly calibrated screen, that's really how big that's going to be. Now, what I was getting at to see if the lettering is too small is you go to View and Show and Hide your grid, and what you're looking for is you want to also set your grid size, the grid blocks, to the minimum stitch width or length that you can get away with an embroidery machine, which is about a millimeter. So if you go to Tools, set your grid block size, and make sure that your grid properties, if you're in inches, are at 0.04 inches, which is right around a millimeter, and that's the shortest a stitch can sew. So what we're going to look at here is, if we look at the lettering here, I'm going to get out of realistic view and show my stitch points and just press letter P. What you're trying to do is you want to measure the distance between each stitch point and make sure that they are at least 1 block wide, ideally 1.5 block wide, and you can see that for the majority of these letters, these stem widths were okay. But there is a danger in this font. Another problem, and let me go ahead, and this is kind of obnoxious here, doing this wide or this white color. So let me set one of these things. Let's try the background color to a darker, maybe a darker, more contrasting color, so we can see a little bit better. Okay. All right, this is a little bit better. So you can see what we're looking at is the distance between the stitch point. Make sure that they're at least 1.5 blocks wide. That's your minimum stitch. And the reason we set that at a minimum is because every one of these stitch points, the needle is going to make a hole about the size of these blocks. So because a 7511 needle is 0.75 millimeters wide, sink that, move over at least 1 millimeters wide, and it'll sink into here, another hole the size of a block. So it's okay back and forth, but one thing in small lettering is you want to pay attention to the negative space inside in loops, like the inside of this lowercase e, the inside of the M's here. We're also making a lot of holes here. So what's going to happen is this is probably going to collapse. So this font is a no-go. Even though it's wide enough, a lot of the inner spaces are going to close up. Another way to check that is go to 1-to-1 view. Let's get out of our regular mode and actually go into 3D mode. And if you can see the insides closing up at this magnification, then it's probably going to close up when you actually sew it. Now, I actually think, in my opinion, the verticals on the M's will close up too. So let's one way to do it is, even though that's a nice looking font, this is the point where you're advising your customer before you've even gotten in the machine. Even me talking through it, we've only invested for your customer only a few minutes here. So we can say, well, this is okay, but I want to advise you that maybe try a different font. Maybe we can do something else. So you can go into editing and select one of the letters and click on this green A. This shows you the layout of the text, and what's really nice about this is that you can then pick a different font. Like I'm going to pick, let's pick Cheltenham Small, which is actually digitized 4 small letters, and let's see what happens. Okay, so now I'm going to try and size that down, and let's see if that's viable. It still may not be. We've got nice wide stems, but if we go to our grid, our 1 millimeter grid, you can see that this is a little bit more open, so this has a little bit better of a chance. I would say you can sort of try that because the holes are at least 1 millimeter block wide. The M here is a little close, but then again, you don't have stitches down here, so I would say you could try this. This is right on the edge just because there are a lot of little spaces that are just under a millimeter block wide. But I would also say, for those of you who've been to my class like Tracy, don't add stretch. That prevents it from bold facing it, and then that opens it up on the inside. So we have a more viable text. The thickness of the stems are okay. It was just the inside spaces. So that's how we are able to get through testing smaller letters and knowing that they're going to sew out okay. All right, finally, the last part of our goal here is to align the text and fit it in a hoop. We've been aligning the text just by dragging it by eye. Now we want to fit it in a hoop. Now if you tap the letter H, you'll see that the 15 centimeter hoop comes up, and you can actually go to Tools and select a different hoop if you want to. So Now you can see that if I save this, this is where it's going to sew. So we want to center that out. So I want to go to Design. Make sure you're not in these modes here. So actually, you can also center the design in General Operating Mode, and you can also choose a fabric. So let's talk about that. We'll center the design by going to Design, Center Design, and hit OK. Just leave it at center frame. And you'll see that it's zoomed in, but if you zoom out again, you can see we're now centered on that hoop center. And you can see we have just enough room for that. And honestly, I did not plan that, but that actually worked out really well. So finally, what we want to do is we want to make sure it's going to sew on the kind of fabric that our customer asked for. So in our scenario, the customer asked for a piqué knit golf shirt. So the way we compensate for that is going to Design and then go to Apply Fabric and find your golf shirts, in this case polo style shirt. You can see jersey knit, which is the smoother kind, or piqué knit, which is the bumpy open weave kind. Hit OK, and you'll watch before I hit OK, I'm at 3690 stitches. And actually, let's do something else. Before we even hit that, I'm going to zoom in real close to the letters, and let's see what happens. Okay, so here's my letters. If I go to Design, Apply Fabric, and we'll pick our fabric, and we're at 3692 stitches. Polo style shirt, piqué knit, hit OK. You can notice that there's a lot more underlay that went under here, and it also went up from 3600 to 59, so it added 2,300 stitches in additional stabilization and density. So it's optimized this sew out for a piqué knit shirt. So that's ready to go. And I recommend, if you're going to need to edit it later, and since we put some work into it, when you save the design, save design as, save it in 2 copies. You want to save it in the CompuCon Stitch and Sew format, so that's, and let's call that TexMac Inc. and hit OK. And then, so that's your master copy that you can do all those edits that we did. And now let's save a sewing copy. You go to File, Save Design As, and then make your sewing copy in DST, EXP, or TAP, whichever you want to, texmacinc.dst. So, and one thing I forgot to mention too is you can also go in and look and see if you want to trim between some of these sections. Like you can see that with our tighter tolerances, that that this one there is a trim here. Maybe we want to remove that trim. Never trim there. So you can see where it is going to cut. Edit connection, trim here. Or don't trim. Generally, you kind of don't want to trim. We definitely want to trim between embroidery and machines. You want to minimize the number of trims that you can for not only for saving time and sewing, but also you're trying to minimize the risk by not using the trimmer hardware. Now, I can see there's a jump stitch between I and D and embroidery. Maybe I do want to trim there, so trim always there. And then if you had to make these last minute changes, oh, the I in the end, there's also a connecting stitch. So anywhere there's a connecting stitch that you don't want, then go ahead and do it. But you can see everything else looks closest point connection. So I'll save that again, Control S, and then save the design as also a DST file as well. So we have our sewing copy. So that takes care of a typical lettering job. Let me see if anybody's asking any questions here. So Jim, Michael, Barb, or Tracy, any questions about what we've done? I've been talking a while, so you all are welcome to ask any questions.